Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. My God, why have you forsaken me? These words from Matthew 27 echo through the ages the abandonment which Jesus felt on that cross at Golgotha. The intimacy with God that he had come to be so familiar with was withdrawn in those moments. Dare I say that in this moment, God was practicing social distancing from Jesus. I think I can say that because we define sin as separation from God. And to get right to the point of it, our theology of the Passion story of Jesus says that on the cross, Jesus took upon himself our sin, our separation from God. We can debate to what degree the mortal human part of Jesus understood what his role would be in this sacrifice. His willingness to give himself over is depicted beautifully in the Gospels. But was he prepared for what the experience would actually feel like? In the anguish of those words cried from the cross, I think not. It was excruciating for him. So does Jesus know what social distancing feels like? Social, physical, spiritual distancing, whatever we're calling it right now. Oh, I think he does. Last week, Emil shared my devotion on social fasting with those on the email distribution. I said that a fast is a temporary change in our normal routine which causes us to miss something in the material world in order to focus on the spiritual world. Notice that this is not just some random action. A spiritual practice always has a purpose. Fasting ensures that we don't forget something. What we miss is a built-in reminder to do what we have committed to do during the fasting period. Often this is simply a commitment to notice God's presence in everyday life, to take advantage of that awareness and be conversational with the Lord. This is what I had in mind about a half dozen years out of seminary when I attempted my first major fast. I joined a pair of colleagues for an extended weekend at the Abbey of Gethsemane, a monastery of Trappist monks outside of Bardstown, Kentucky. For the 5 days that we were there, we took a vow of silence and a vow to eat only the simple meals provided by the kitchen. 5 days alone with my thoughts and prayers. It was a fast from our families, a fast from speaking, a fast from overeating. And for the first couple of days, my head swam with missing my family and the work of ministry left back home. One of these friends had done a 7-day vow of silence the year before. And he claimed that it took a couple of days for the clamor of the world to settle down in his head. I had the same experience. And finally, on the 4th day, I experienced a peace in my inner voice that was new to me. It was quite something. And the prayer journal that I kept that weekend has become a real treasure for me ever since. The whole point of a fast is that we remove something from our routine, and it's a break in our routine, not a permanent derailment of the routine. The Bible does not command us to pray. Jesus assumes that we already practice spiritual fasting. It was a given in ancient times. In Matthew chapter 6, Jesus is giving instructions to his disciples about their fasting. He said, "Whenever you fast, do not look dismal like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces so to show others that they're fasting. Truly, I tell you, they've received their reward. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that your fasting may be seen not by others, but by your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. When you fast, you can initially be rather miserable. Hunger is no fun. It's easy to fall into the trap of, rather than focusing our attention on God, we just get hangry, or as we say in my house, crabby hungry. Jesus is pointing out that it's easy to take our misery out on others, or to show it off in a prideful way. So what is the point then of fasting, if it just serves to make us miserable or self-serving? I experienced a week-long fast with a group of youth who asked this same question. It was an inward-bound summer work camp with a church youth group, a church I was serving in Rochester, New York, and we traveled to Cleveland, Ohio, to take part in an inward-bound experience. Inward-bound meaning a city dive. Some of you may be familiar with the outward-bound program, which is a wilderness dive experience with youth. So we went to Cleveland to work on a Habitat for Humanity house. And our inward-bound hosts who were running the program asked us to commit to a week without electronics, without caffeine, and eating only simple meals without second helpings. So we had some kids who refused to sign up for this experience because this was part, or would be part, of the covenant for the week. In the first couple days, the kids who did go complained. And quite frankly, the adults complained, because caffeine withdrawal isn't pretty, my friends. We spent the week meeting people, however, who regularly missed meals because of poverty. We worked alongside them, and we came to appreciate not having ostentatious meals to eat next to them at the work site. And we always had an extra bag lunch or two to give away to someone not in our group. We visited an inner-city community garden, which was the only source of vegetables for a whole block of families. And by the end of the week, people weren't complaining. And we discovered that this wasn't asked of us just to be difficult. There is a long and well-established tradition of spiritual fasting that assured our hosts that we would come out of the experience better rather than worse. The reasons didn't mean a whole lot to most of the group at the beginning, but fasting creates an open space in our routines and our attitudes that's pretty abstract until you experience it. During the work week, we filled this open time with journaling, with prayer, with community time, with community service. And by the end, the kids themselves admitted that they felt closer to each other, closer to God, because of the common experience and lack of distractions. They were forced to play board games, to talk during downtime rather than just disconnect and watch things on their phones. And God honored the sacrifice. God's Spirit was more tangible to us. The kids fasted by giving up stuff they thought they couldn't live without. And they also fasted the Isaiah 58 fast. They made an assault against the bonds of injustice. They made a difference in a depressed Cleveland neighborhood. They shared the light of hope, the light of Christ, with a family who would live in the home that they helped to build. Why should we fast? When should we fast? Whenever we want a clearer connection with God. This is the solid food, the spiritually mature food that we should be growing towards. The food sometimes of no food or less food for a time. The food of service, the food of solitude, the food of devotion. The kids came back from that week and looked at their own lives differently. And we will look at our lives and we will practice our lives differently after COVID-19. These kids were middle-class kids, but they realized how affluent they really were. Some of them said that they were so affluent that they felt dirty. It made them less concerned about having the latest gadget or a bigger bedroom than their sibling after that week. Fasting, an intentional and temporary choice, opened them up to a larger picture of God's heart. During this upcoming Holy Week, let us listen with ears of faith to Jesus' cry of agony, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Let us know the solidarity of Jesus, the solidarity he feels for us in our isolation, because he experienced ultimate isolation. And perhaps then we will be able to add some purpose to this fast, which will make it bearable. This involuntary physical distance can be put to use if we put to work our longings to connect. And perhaps then we will also be able to remember God's companionship when we are lonely. And may that lead us to pray, may it lead us to journal, to read our Bibles, to prepare for Easter. May this fast also teach us to hear with that inner ear the cry of those less fortunate around us, for those who are lonely, those living in faraway parts of the world who are suffering the same thing that we are. The voices of fellow human beings who may be starving or homeless, victims of crime, victims of poverty, suffering from illness or separation or experiencing a terrible loss. Let us listen with ears of faith. Let us listen with the passion of our own hearts and not attempt to find easy answers, but just listen. Amen.